Hey, what's going on? This is Coast Watch Football, the ultimate hub for fans of Central Coast Mariners, and this is the weekly podcast where we chat all things Mariners and the A-League. And this is going to be a big episode because, of course, we have the announcement of the fixture list. It's the first 6 fixtures for the 2021-22 season, which is really exciting to finally have some dates locked in for the upcoming season. It's just 2 months away, less than 2 months away now, and this podcast is going to keep you company all the way through the rest of the preseason. And in this episode, we are, of course, going to be finishing off our greatest Mariners team of all time, picking players throughout A-League history, which, I mean, hasn't been that long, relatively speaking, but last week we went through goalkeepers and defenders, and that was fairly easy to choose the goalkeepers and the defenders, to be honest. So it's going to be a bit more interesting when we're talking with this episode. We're now touching on the midfield and attacking departments, and there's been so many great, especially in midfield. I think midfield is probably the center of the park, is where the Mariners have had so many strong players over the years. And in terms of forwards, it's been a bit hit or miss, to be honest, at times. And it's just going to be interesting to dive into them. And again, of course, hearing what you guys think and what you guys have to say in terms of who have been your sort of the greatest Mariners players of all time. And we're sort of going to be putting them together in a nice cohesive formation. And I'll be talking about some bench players as well that will sneak in at the end. But let's jump into the news, of course, the Mariners fixtures. Let's run through them right now. We are kicking off on Sunday, November 21st. It's a 4 or 5 p.m. kickoff, and it's an F3 derby away to Newcastle Jets. A great way to kick off a season. Of course, we started last season against Newcastle Jets. Of course, that home game where Alukwal scored that winning goal in that 1-0 victory in round 1 last year. So I like this. I like kicking off the season with an F3 derby. It's a nice, exciting way to build the hype, and I'm sure we'll be getting a nice, strong travelling support up there to Newcastle. I remember when we played there towards the end of last season, which would have been around March or April. There was a great turnout there. A lot of the sort of the away support that we got to the Wanderers game and to the Sydney FC game, even the MacArthur game. Like our away support last year, I mean, to be fair, we just sort of matching the performances on the field, So when the team's performing on the field, that's when, especially those away days are super exciting, and we get a lot of numbers along, which is always a fun time. It's always a fun time. That is round 1. Round 2, our first home game. We'll touch on the home game thing because, of course, they've been listed as TBC. We'll touch on that in a sec. Saturday, 27th of November, 5:05 against Wellington Phoenix. The following Sunday, away to MacArthur, and then a home game the following week against Sydney FC, and home game the following week as well against Western Sydney Wanderers. And then finally away to Wellington Phoenix. That's taking us through to the end of December. So, of course, they're sort of, as we expected, they sort of touched on that they would be, sort of releasing the fixture list in segments. And at the moment, it's just the New South Wales clubs playing each other. Of course, Wellington Phoenix looks like they'll be coming over for, at least a little while. So all of these games, of course, in New South Wales, and hopefully, I mean, with restrictions easing, soon in a few weeks' time, we'll be able to get to these games, these away games as well. Of course, it'd be good to get to, of course, Newcastle and down to MacArthur as well. And yeah, man, it's exciting stuff. It's exciting to finally have these dates locked in. So, as I mentioned, less than 2 months away, and it's going to come around quick. But the big sort of, not big thing, but just a little bit of a question mark around the Mariners fixture list. And I got a sort of a handful of messages from fans sort of asking what was going on. And the whole TBC, if you look at the fixture list, everyone's got their stadiums listed out. Obviously not Wellington Phoenix, they're still sorting out what they're doing. But the Mariners have TBC, to be confirmed, listed as next to their home fixtures, which initially is a little bit concerning. It's like, okay, what's going on? And the Mariners released this little statement on their website on the day of the fixture release, basically saying that there is a venue hire agreement for Central Coast stadiums that is still pending by Central Coast Council, and so it has not yet been finalised. Nothing's been locked in yet. So a little bit of anxiety maybe around that. Then in terms of, obviously we want to have that locked in and ready to go, and I reckon it will be cool by the time the season comes around. There's still a little bit of time. And I think I recall Sean Mellencamp spoke about it briefly in the latest episode of the Coast Football Ramble podcast. He chatted about this. He just touched on it briefly. So I think it's sort of been floating around there for a little bit, but just the way the club has sort of handled it, or sort of just like, talked about it at least, even briefly, it sounds like it's not too much of a concern. Like it will be sorted out. I can't imagine us, having to play our first, handful of home games in a completely different stadium like that. I don't know if this is, from my memory, this sort of thing hasn't happened to any A-League side where we've sort of haven't been able to sort of play in our own home stadium for a little while. Obviously disregarding pandemics and stuff. So I'm fingers crossed that this is going to work out. I think it will work out. And man, I don't know where we would play. Like whether we'd go up to Newcastle, that'd be weird. Probably, most likely thing we'd go somewhere to Sydney. Someone mentioned Plume Park as well, but that's not really I don't think it's up to A-League standard in terms of its like lighting and stuff. So yeah, it's going to be interesting. So hopefully that all comes to fruition and we get Central Coast Stadium locked in for our first few fixtures. We'll make sure to keep you guys updated, of course, on the Coast Watch Football socials. But looking across at the round one fixtures, the A-League is kicking off on Friday, 19th of November. Melbourne City hosting Brisbane Roar. There's a Sydney derby and as well a Victorian derby. The Western United taking on Melbourne Victory. Perth Glory taking on Adelaide United. And of course our F3 derby. And then round one will finish off with Macarthur against Wellington Phoenix. And it's always interesting sort of seeing the scheduling in terms of if there's any new time slots sort of around in how the sort of the rounds are being put together. They have done something new here with the fixture list. So on Saturday night, there's going to be 2 primetime games running at the same time, both kicking off at 7:45. So usually we would see sort of a 5 o'clock a game around 5 o'clock, and then later on in the night, of course, the primetime game kicking off around 7:45. But this time, now having 2 games at 7:45. And the A-League released this post on their official socials, basically explaining sort of some of the key details of the broadcast, and this sort of expands on this a bit more. So there's going to be simultaneous Saturday night kickoffs, live goal updates from both games. So this is for when you're watching it on Paramount Plus. And there's going to be apparently a dynamic multi-screen viewing across Network 10 and Paramount Plus. So whether those, I don't think it's been announced whether those Saturday night games are going to be broadcast on 10 Play or something. I assume maybe they will. But they have said that one A-League game a week on Channel 10 and then one W-League game per week on 10 Bold. So I'm thinking fans probably would have hoped for maybe if we gotten at least 2 or 3, just a few more on free-to-air would have been nice. Of course, all games available on Paramount Plus, the new streaming service. But yeah, what do you guys think of this? Because if you jump into the comments section, like on the Instagram hit posts that they've put up, the fans are livid, man. Which I was surprised to see, because my personal opinion, I actually love it. I do, and I wonder if there's any other fans out there that like to hold. I'm talking about the simultaneous kickoff on Saturday nights. I think that's awesome. I don't know if you guys watch much Premier League. In the Premier League, here and on the eastern coast of Australia, it's around midnight at the moment, where they generally have 4 to 6 Premier League games kicking off at the same time. And they have Optus Sport have a thing called Goal Rush, where they'll show a main game, but then they'll also be cutting to highlights and goals from the other games, like just here and there, and they'll have the scores written down down below, like a little graphic. I love that. It's really exciting just knowing that there's all this action happening at the same time, and you can cross to one thing, cross to another. I like that. I like that they're doing that, not necessarily just being here's 2 channels, pick one. You can have a channel that you watch where it's going to pick, I assume just the most high profile game, and then sort of just cutting in and out with the other game. I like that. I think it's exciting. It creates a bit of, I don't know, anything can sort of happen. The fact that, if a goal gets scored in another game, you can just sort of just pop on here and there, and it's sort of keeping you on the feet. And as a viewing experience, I just think that would be super entertaining. So I was kind of surprised to see so many people upset. But yeah, man, I like it. I think it's going to be interesting. I think maybe it's just going to take a little bit for people to get used to, maybe. But yeah, we'd love to hear what you guys think of the simultaneous kickoff thing. primetime Saturday nights, I personally really enjoy it. But that's all the details in terms of the fixtures and the broadcast stuff. As I mentioned, super exciting that we now have it locked in because, of course, there was a bit of question as well whether kickoff, would be that end of October date or whether it would be pushed back. And, of course, it was looking more and more likely that it was going to get pushed back to November. But we have that locked in now. And the way that things are looking with the pandemic and vaccine rates and everything, it looks like it's going to be all full steam ahead for mid-November for that kickoff date on November 19th. All right, let's dive into our topic of conversation for this episode. And we are, of course, as I mentioned at the top of the episode, talking about the greatest Mariners team of all time. And I want to touch on some of the things that you guys dropped in some of the comments, talking about your greatest Mariners teams. There was some interesting players who I didn't even think of that have popped up here and there. Mustafa Amini, Tom Rogic in there as well. A lot of people talking about Bernie Abini, Mitch Duke, of course, Daniel McBreen popping up a lot. And what else have we got? In terms of like the back line, it was pretty much, everyone's in unison that back line is pretty much just the same players all the way around. And as I mentioned, it's going to be really interesting diving into the midfield and attacking department. So let's jump into it right now because we don't want to waste any time. Starting off with the central midfield positions, for me, the first guy that I'm locking in, and for me, he's one of our greatest players of all time. He's probably top 5 for me, is Mile Jedinak. And he was my favorite player growing up. I distinctly remember him smashing that free kick in that dramatic 5-4 loss at home to Sydney FC, which I think was 2007. He scored that banging free kick towards the start of the game, and that was like one of the things he was instantly known for, just those like pile driving free kicks, and he scored a few of them throughout his A-League career, and scored a few, of course, overseas and for the Socceroos as well. But Mile was such a fierce competitor. He was tall, he was strong, and I think it's really important to always have a solid defensive midfielder with that sort of stature. And I also remember actually there was a time where we were short on centre backs. I think some of our central defenders were sort of injured and we were running low on numbers at the back. And it must have been Laurie McKenna at the time who shifted Mile Jedinak into central defence. And he killed it. He killed it back there. So not only was he an incredible sort of holding midfielder, but he was versatile in that sense where if he needed to shift back or shift further up the field, he was good in an overall sense as well. He contributed to attacks as well. But yeah, he's just a guy that I always go to when I think of the Mariners midfield. And as I mentioned, like I think there's so many strong names when it comes to the Mariners midfielders over the years. But for me, Mile Jedinak represents really those early years of the Central Coast Mariners, those early years, and of course seeing what he's done now for, obviously he's retired now, but everything he did for the Socceroos, captaining the side at World Cups, scoring penalties, so consistent from the penalty spot, and obviously had a great career overseas, even in the Premier League as well. So alongside Mile Jedinak is going to go, and this is tough, man. This is tough. I was tossing up who was going to sit alongside Mile Jedinak as part of sort of the two holding midfielders, and I've gone for John Hutchinson. And I think a big part of that is his commitment to the club, just the fact that he was here for such a long time, captained the side there. After Wilkinson left, and in those early years, I remember he was sort of playing as like a wide player. He was like playing as both on the left-hand, right side. He was a player that was great with both feet too. He showed that throughout his A-League career, the way he could like play long balls with both feet and just switch the play on a dime. He was a player that really sort of, it was great to seeing him mature throughout his A-League career, and he really turned into towards those his last few years in his career, in his Mariners career, turned into a really solid defensive midfielder. And I think a lot of the credit has to go to Graham Arnold. We lost Roston Griffiths. I think it must have been 2011, 2012. I can't remember now. it was around that 2011-12 season we lost Roston Griffiths, who was sort of our key holding midfielder. And then John Hutchinson sort of became that key sort of holding midfielder for us when we were playing that diamond formation. And also as well when we went to the 4-2-3-1. And, Hutchinson's partnership with Montgomery in that championship winning season is was such a key feature to our success. And obviously we're bringing like sort of Ollie Bozanic into that sort of setup as well. He's just like the signature Mariners player. And, thinking back to all the F3 derbies as well, and the Jets fans, they hated John Hutchinson and Hutcho loved it. He loved getting up and he was always fired up for those F3 derbies. And you could just tell he was a player. Again, I really... Some of my favorite Mariners players are players that you can just tell just genuinely care about the club. That when they're playing, they're not just there for their own sort of, their own, when they're on the field, you can tell that they're there to sort of, they're representing the club and, they're playing for the badge, which we always love to see as fans. So John Hutchinson and Mile Jedinak, I feel like that's a really strong sort of defensive midfield partnership. And of course, sort of Nick Montgomery was in and around there. He very easily could have put him in there as well, and Roston Griffiths as well. Those were sort of the two. I guess they can be sort of the two backups for those holding midfield positions for me. Let's move into the wide positions now. And on the right hand side of midfield, I'm going to place. And again, this was a close one. I'm going to go Michael McGlinchey. We're going to go Michael McGlinchey because I think he was incredibly underrated, and we are talking specifically about his stint, his first stint with us. Of course, he had two stints with the Mariners, and his second one wasn't quite as eventful. But his first sort of few years with the Mariners there, first of all playing in that diamond shape, and then of course in the championship season he was playing predominantly on that right hand side, or even coming in as the number 10. And what a player! What an exciting player! Josh Nisbet reminds me a lot of Michael McGlinchey. The fact that they're both quite short in stature, but incredibly agile in their ability to sort of like create opportunities out of nothing and burst through defenses and find the gaps. He was just such an exciting player to watch, and every time he was on the ball, created things, scored goals here and there as well. And again, just one of my favorite players. It's a shame that his second stint with us wasn't quite as eventful. He came back after some time with Wellington Phoenix, and I mean that was a time where our team was chopping and changing, and it was just a difficult time for the club. So, but yeah, man, Michael McGlinchey, he's a lock in that right midfield position for me. I saw some people as well on the socials talking about Bernie Abeni. 100% fair shout. Someone mentioned Fabio Ferreira, which was a bit of a left field pick, a bit of an oddball pick there. But Fabio was definitely one of our most exciting players. He was sort of one of those players in the team at a time when we were struggling on the field and the performances weren't quite there. Fabio was a player that really got the fans sort of up and out of their seats every time he was on the ball and charging forward. And he probably didn't quite. He probably didn't quite perform as well as he did at Adelaide United here at the Mariners, but still a fair shout, Fabio Ferreira. On the left-hand side, I'm going to put Oliver Bozanic. And again, this was a close one for me because there was a whole bunch of players I could have put there as well. Mile Stajowski was very close to locking in that left-hand side position. Of course, he was a key figure in that championship winning season on the left wing. But Oliver Bozanic, and I think the most recent season has just really cemented this spot for me. And yes, I know. Actually, I should address that now at the top that he's a central midfielder, and even just like a holding midfielder now, I guess, in terms of our current setup. But in those early seasons, he was playing predominantly as especially in that diamond. It was him, Ollie on the left hand side, McGlinchey on the right hand side, and then the holding midfielder was sitting in behind. So I feel like early on in his career, he was sort of a bit more attacking in terms of his play, and could even probably play as a number 10 as well. And actually, you know what? A lot of credit has to go to Graham Arnold. The way that he set up that diamond shape and found those players to play those positions specifically. Because I feel like those two in the diamond midfield, you get a holding midfielder who's, whether it was, Rustin Griffiths or John Hutchinson, and but to play those two sort of positions, sort of on the wide side, like sort of tucked in those narrow positions on the right and left hand side of that diamond formation. It's a tricky position to play. You have to have an incredible engine, and credit to Graham Arnold for finding two players to really, play that position really well in McGlinchey and Bozanic. And I loved watching that team that went to Brisbane for the grand final. Of course, didn't quite work out. But that diamond formation, which of course included the likes of Mustafa Amini in there as well, that was an exciting team to watch. And yeah, Bozanic and McGlinchey were a key part of that team's success as well. And yeah, just seeing what Ollie has done, coming back to the club, providing leadership for these young players, putting on the captain's armband. And, he's a coasty lad. And again, just a guy that you can tell really cares about the club. And I just love watching him on the field and have fond memories of that goal he scored against Adelaide United from outside the box. That was a really exciting moment for Ollie and for the fans as well. So that's going to be my midfield for the Mariners. So Millie Jedinak, John Hutchinson, and then either side of them, Michael McGlinchey and Oliver Bozanic. I think you have plenty of creativity in that midfield, and I think you have plenty of defensive sort of stability in there as well. Yeah, man. I mean, maybe some fans will sort of be raising some eyebrows, and maybe I didn't mention Tom Rogic, Mustafa Amini. I think, well, actually, with those two players, they're fantastic players, but I think their careers they were only just getting started at the Mariners, you know what I mean? Like, they obviously went on to bigger and better things. Both have obviously featured for the national side, the Socceroos as well. They went on to bigger and better things, and the Mariners were just like a launching platform for them. Whereas if you look at players like Michael McGlinchey and Oliver Bozanic, really had a really rich career at the Mariners and played some of their best football here. So that's what I look at. This isn't necessarily purely on like a skill talent thing, like who is their best player, because Tommy Rogic is probably up there. Tommy Rogic was amazing, but when you look at him, he didn't necessarily have that much play time here at the Mariners. He didn't spend that long here. Not to say that he wouldn't be in talks in terms of who would be in this greatest Mariners team of all time. Tommy is certainly up there and played some great football for us in his short stint. But yeah, going for McGlinchey and Ollie Bozanic. Now it's time to talk about the forwards. And I feel like this is probably the easiest. There's one striker who is absolutely a lock, and that, of course, is Daniel McBreen. And I feel like this is just the easiest one. Every fan on the socials was saying that Daniel McBreen was a lock for them as well because, he won the Golden Boot, championship winning year. It has to be Daniel McBreen. And, as I touched on earlier, we haven't really had the best run of luck with strikers. Some of them have been hit and miss, but Daniel McBreen in 2012, 2013 was just so consistent. And the thing that I liked about McBreen is he just wasn't necessarily just a stereotypical striker that was just up there, was really good at holding up the ball, scored some goals here, scoring goals here and there. He was a player that he was quite versatile. There was many times where he would be tucking back and playing as a number 10. And that's what I loved about McBreen. His versatility, his work rate was incredible as well. And just how clinical he was in that championship winning season to win the Golden Boot, and of course scored that penalty in the grand final to secure that 2-0 grand final win against the Wanderers back in 2013. Has to be Daniel McBreen. Not too much else to say there. And then alongside him, and this is the final position that was tricky to choose, I'm going to put Matty Simon. And again, that might be interesting because there's probably and skillfully, on a skillful sort of, rating, I guess, there's probably better Mariners strikers out there. No disrespect to Matty. But what Simon brings to this club and what he has given to this club over all of these years, can't go unrecognized. And I think he just has to go into this team. He's our highest scorer of all time. He's the top Mariners scorer in Mariners history. And he's someone, again, that cares about the club. He's even though he did spend some time away to Sydney FC, and that was always tricky to see, especially that time he's got that goal against us when Sydney FC came up here and played us a few years back. But ignoring that, he's been a great servant for the club. And here from the early years, and he's still here. And after his season last year, that I think that sort of restored. See, I don't want to say restored respect in the fans for Matt Simon, because it's not that fans didn't respect him, but he was a little bit of a, you know what I mean, right? Like Matt Simon, he's become a bit of an A-League meme, right? Where it's like he's known for sort of getting in opposition players' faces, rattling up defenders. He's a very physical player. It's some of his great attributes, the fact that he can sort of get in there and he's really passionate. And he's become a meme of the A-League, it has to be said. But this last season, he was scoring goals in his combinations with Marco Renia, and thinking I think it was voted our goal of the season, the Mariners' goal of the season, that goal away to Wanderers, where he chipped the ball over the keeper. Amazing. And, he's aging like a fine wine, Matt Simon, I think. And hopefully this upcoming season, he's signed on that 1-year deal. So perhaps this might be his final year with the Mariners. We'll have to wait and see. But the way he's going, he's absolutely killing it. And hopefully him and Arenya can continue that amazing partnership that they developed last season. So that concludes my starting 11 for my greatest Mariners team of all time. Daniel McBreen and Matt Simon up top. So let's run through the starting lineup. Starting at the back, Matty Ryan in goals, Pedj Bojic right back in the central defense, Trent Sainsbury and Patrick Zwanzwijk. Left back, Josh Rose in the centre of midfield, Mile Jedinak and John Hutchinson. Michael McGlinchey and Oliver Bozanic on the wide positions. And up front, Daniel McBreen and Matt Simon. Let's run you through my bench. These are the players that almost made it, but didn't quite make the cut. We are talking about Mark Burigidi in goals. He's my backup keeper. And I sort of picked one player from each sort of position: defense, central midfield, wide midfields, and then forwards. So Alex Wilkinson is my backup defender. I'm going for Roston Griffiths. Absolutely loved Roston Griffiths. I think he was incredibly underrated during his time here at the club. Roston Griffiths for centre mid. For the wide positions, I'm going to go Bernie Abini. I think he's an incredible athlete and just a wonderful player for the Mariners. Again, that championship-winning year. And for the striker and for the forwards, we are going to roll back the years to Sasho Petrovsky. And I'm glad some fans mentioned his name in the comments. Sasho Petrovsky is a guy who was an incredible finisher, and he scored a number of goals for the Mariners in those early seasons. And obviously spent some time with our rivals, Newcastle Jets. But he had a great time here at the Mariners, and helped us get into that 2008 grand final. So Adam Kwasnik almost made it in there because he was a great 7 to this club as well. But Sasha Petrovsky is a lock for me on the bench. So there you have it. There's my Mariners team, greatest Mariners team of all time. Would love to hear what your greatest Mariners team of all time is. Have I made some interesting decisions? Would love to hear your thoughts. So, of course, you can drop those in the YouTube comments. If you're watching the podcast on YouTube, of course, the Coastwatch Football Podcast, every single Tuesday on YouTube and all of the podcast platforms if you want to listen to it in audio form. And make sure you check out Coastwatch Football on all of the social media platforms. That's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok as well. And keeping you updated with all the latest news and chit-chat surrounding the Mariners and the A-League. Thanks, guys, for checking out this episode, and I'll chat to you next Tuesday.